Hello, welcome to the August 25th, 2026 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, it's always helpful if you could indicate which exact Steinberg program you're running. So if it's Cubase, it could be Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, like 13, 14, or 15. Also, the operating system that you're running on. So if you're running on Windows or Mac OS, that information is helpful. You should, if you don't see an immediate response to your question, realize that it may take a little while. We will go through each of the questions chronologically as asked. And if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and there's over 45,000 topics that have been covered, and you could navigate to a quick search there. We have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience on the live streams, and we're grateful for their contributions. We'll also extend a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. That's a wonderful site for downloading, for being able to, it's kind of a collection of tutorials, presets, downloads, templates. So lots of great stuff that is available that's super beneficial to the Steinberg community. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. A couple quick programming notes. Friday's live stream will be the last live stream of the month. So we will do our customary Club Cubase Zoom social meetup. So we'll go for about 2 hours and then start our Zoom social meetup, which is a great way to meet people that are on the live streams. It's always fascinating discussions. We will have a special guest. So it looks like we will have Bob Bullock, who's an amazing engineer, producer based in Nashville. He's just, a stellar list of credits. I mean, he was the engineer on Shania Twain's big album with Mutt Lange. He was also one of the people, I believe he was one of the people that, transferred the drums from from Fleetwood Mac Rumors from the safety copy to the real copy. So he was probably responsible for saving Fleetwood Mac Rumors. I think he was an assistant on Steely Dan Asia sessions. But he's also worked with Kenny Rogers, George Strait, Reba McEntire, John Schneider, who was, from Dukes of Hazzard, who has a singing career as well, has done a lot of work with him. So just a stellar engineer and a super nice guy. So he'll be our special guest. So I think if you want to look him up, his web address may be bobbullock.net, BULLOCK. So he'll be our special guest, kind of sharing some of his insights, how he uses Nuendo for his production work, and just a super smart, super nice guy. So I'm looking forward to everyone meeting him. Also, next week, I will be traveling to Hamburg. I won't be able to do live streams until I believe it's going to be September 11th. Will be our next live stream after Fridays. I was trying to set up to do a live stream from Hamburg, but the timing and meetings and stuff just didn't work out this time. Hopefully next time I go to Hamburg, we'll be able to do a live stream from the office, which I look forward to doing. But so after Friday's live stream, our next live stream, I believe, will be on September 11th, that Friday. So just a quick programming note with that. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and get started. So we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. Great to see you on. We see Klaus joining from Malmo, Sweden. All right, and we have Stefan Larson joining from Bollnäs, Sweden. I'm sure I said that wrong. Thanks for being on, Stefan. We have FlyV's Vince from Winnipeg, Canada. We have Tim as Sabertooth Bicycle joining from Zeist, Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Mark Raven's dog Stella, and other pets that are nearby, and he's ready to learn. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index is back from vacation. We hope you had a wonderful holiday. Let us know where you went. We're just all curious. All right. I get to travel vicariously through other people's vacations. All right, so we have Gidrius Zara saying greetings. Thanks for joining us. Adam Langford joining from Bedfordshire, UK. Great to see you on. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. So appreciative of everything he does for us. All right, so we see wonderful to see Ray Kemp joining from Devon in the UK. Says I missed too many of these sessions. Made this one with a big mug of coffee. Great. Chatfield jumped. All right, so we see says I'm Ikins. I'm a mix and mastering engineer based in Lagos, Nigeria. I've been using Cubase for 5 years. Thanks for joining the live stream today. All right, Michael Graybill joining from Dallas. We see Soren joining from Sweden, and TrackQuest Music joining from North Georgia. Okay. All right, so we have a question from TrackQuest Music. Greg, does Steinberg have anything coming out possibly with AI helping compose with anything in Cubase? So we could say that there's, depending on what your definition of AI is, we could say like, the chord track, being able to suggest chords for you that make musical sense. That's been in for a long time. That's using some AI algorithms. We have some AI algorithms for the in the pattern editor as well. So if you open up, let's say, the pattern editor, there's going to be some AI functionality in there so that when you do random generation, let's say for something along the lines of, that it's going to make sense that you randomize for typical kick, hi-hat, tom, snare, patterns. We also have the omnivocal. So, we have, your virtual singer. So some people would call that AI. So, I think, there's always, we want to, it's always an interesting discussion topic that we have a lot on the Zoom social meetups of, like, should it be more generative? Should it be, maybe aiding stuff to, like help with repetitive tasks? So, there's a lot of stuff that could be deemed AI already in. I'm sure that Steinberg is always working on new things as well. All right, so we see Gidrius is from Lithuania. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Virtual Alan. Great to see you back from Scotland. Okay, so we see the FlyV won't be around. It says maybe an hour on Friday. We see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. And he has fires west, about 25 miles west. We hope that your house will be safe. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer joining from Mission Viejo, saying hi, hello to all Cubase friends. All right, so we see Adam Langford says, got it on my way this Friday, so I can't make the stream. Sorry about that. All right, great to see Tony Chunzo joining from Australia. Great. Let's see. Flyview just says 1 day before his birthday. So we'll hope you have a wonderful birthday celebration, Vince. All right. We see Benny joining from Sweden. Michael Teams is already doing virtual ice cream distribution. All right, Tim Moinheimer asks, I have 3 VST instruments inside a folder track. How can I move one out of the folder track? Thanks. Okay, so let me just add some VST instruments. Okay, so say I add 3 virtual instrument tracks. So we have our Hallian Sonics here. I'm going to put these into a folder track. All right, so I'm going to move these to a new folder. All right, so now we have our 3 instruments in our Hallian Sonic folder. All right, so if I wanted to move one out, I think I would just drag it like that. So now we see 2 instruments within the folder, and this instrument is out of the folder. So if I want to move it back into the folder, we could do that, or I could just come over here, select, open up the folder, select the instrument track, and at that point, just simply move it to a different spot. So even if I want to move it above, I could just come right there, and now that's not within the folder, it's independent of the folder. So you could just kind of drag the track or tracks in and out of the folder, or rearrange the tracks within a folder if you want. So let me know if that makes sense. Great. We see John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we have Isonom sending greetings from Andorra, such a great little country between Spain and France in the Pyrenees Mountains. I remember working at Harry Gregson Williams, and one of his assistants was from Andorra. Maybe our first attendee from Andorra. Thanks. Okay, so we see Michael Teams asks, I'm lost on find tempo. Please run through tempo detect feature. All right. So I think I got a project audio file here that we could use. All right, so let's say we'll take this particular file here. And let's listen to, so let's say we have this starting, I'll just start that on the beat there. And as we listen to this, and I put my click track on, we have no correlation between the click track and the actual file. So what I want to do is I'm going to select the event, and this could be MIDI or audio. Select the event, come right over here, and let's say go to your tempo track, to tempo detection. So we'll say analyze. So now as we come over here, all right, now as it does this, the tempo, and I may have my tempo track, I'll move this to the top here. It's going to automatically open up the tempo track, and it's going to automatically open up my time signature track. So we can see, as we look at this particular file, we can say, okay, start off. So now we probably want this listening to the music, and we count the meter that we're going to be in 4/4. So I will come right over here, say, okay, we're in 4/4 time. So now we've done our tempo detection, and we can see how you see all of our tempos right over here. Now, if we want to take this file and immediately say, okay, I want this file to play back at another tempo when it has varying tempo, what we could do is just go to your audio menu, and we'll go to advanced and say set definition from tempo. So I could save this metadata, which is basically all of the tempo information as metadata into the audio file itself. So when I hit OK, so now we can say, okay, looking at this, let's say I want it to be roughly like 120 beats a minute. So I'll come right over here, turn off my existing tempo track. Or if I want it to be 132. Or say 112. So now it's gonna, once I've selected the event, I went to my audio menu to advanced, and we do set definition from tempo. Now this will automatically follow our tempo change. So if I want to activate the tempo track again, so I will turn this on, and now we could have, multiple tempo changes appear here. So if I want this to ramp up, I could just have that speed up. So as we listen to it, so sorry about here, we can still keep our tempo changes, but still have kind of an accelerando. And then back to our original tempo. Now let's say I want to take the tempo and just make it more steady overall. I could select a range of tempo here, and we could go to my kind of the right center side. And I can still have some fluctuations, but I could tighten the tempo up so that the fluctuations aren't as wide. Or if I wanted to, if it's too similar, I can make the fluctuations wider here. So when in doubt, select the events, and this works for audio or MIDI. Go to your project, to tempo track, to tempo detection. And then once you have the tempo detected, you'll be presented with a 1/4 meter, type in the correct meter that you want. And at that point, if you want to have that audio follow other tempo, just go to your audio menu to advanced, set definition from tempo, and then it's going to follow whatever tempo settings you have in a project, whether you want it to be steady or modify the existing tempo with its tempo changes. All right. Okay, go back to my... Great, so see track quest music. All right, so we see TrackQuest Music asks, I saw somebody on YouTube made a track preset logical editor, made all tracks disable all plugins except the track he wanted to render. Can you show, please? Okay, so just open up a quick project where we can just throw on some... All right, so I'll just go ahead and add some plugins to this. So let me just select. Okay, so I'm going to hold down my Alt Shift or Option plus Shift. So let's say we want to put on say a frequency EQ, all the channels. Wanted to put on, say, and let's put just, all right, so we have all these channels. Okay, so let's say we want to disable every plugin on every channel except for the selected channels. All right, so let's come over, let's go to our project logical editor. All right, so to disable all of like the insert plugins, so let's come over here. We're going to select transform, and we want to say our container type is equal to track, and we will say our property is set to is not set to selected. Okay. And at this point, we want to go to track operation, and then we will see enable insert slot by number. All right. And I'm just going to do this multiple times here. So let's say we want that to toggle. So we'll say track operation, enable insert slot by number. We will toggle, and we'll make this insert slot 2. And we could do this multiple times up through 16. I'll just go to 4 for brevity's sake. All right, so let's see if I did this right. We'll hit apply. Let me just, all right, our media type is audio. Let's try that. So you could just come right over there. So let's, all right, so let's undo our mix here. Let's say I select this. Sure why the de-esser is not going, but that would be kind of how to set it up. Let me just, all right, just a different plugin on this. Put another plugin across all of the channels here. Most of them. Turn something on manually. Great, so let's see. So I'll select this channel. Sure why 3 and 4 aren't going. Let me just try to, but let's just say I want to disable all of those. say our media type is audio. Okay, so come here. Let's try to add this again. I may have see if I have just a user preset. So here we have all inserts on and off. Okay, I'm going to try building it from that preset. Let's turn these on so they're all at the same state. All right, so here we have like all 16. So I just did property is set to is selected. So let's say. All right, so that would allow us to do that. But let's say we want almost the opposite of that. So I'm going to say property is not set to is selected. So we have this done. All right, let me change this setting one more time. Sorry about that. All right, so we're going to say property is not set to is selected. And so just come over here, and this would disable all of the tracks. So we want to say container type is equal to track. Property is not set to is selected. And then under track operation, enable insert slot by number. Then we could just toggle. So, and at that point, only the selected track. So I'll undo our mixer set. So I will come over here. So if this is my selected track, every other track will toggle. And then you could just undo that particular setting right there. Not sure why the other one didn't work, but if you make this, I could save it as a preset. And if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'll be happy to share the preset with you. But then you can just select that, run that preset, and undo and toggle back and forth. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from 101 Shred says here, when putting tracks into a folder, my output bus was messed up. Is there a way to change the output back to stereo out on multiple tracks at once instead of changing it by track by track? So it could be if it is set to a group, like a folder with group track. So right now, when I come over here, I don't have this as a folder track, but if this is set to a group track, so we will come over here. So I will enable the group channel. So now if I drag my bass into this, that should automatically route the output of the bass to go into the folder. So let's say our drum folder. So if you have a folder with group channel, then it may assume that but if you wanted to change multiple tracks, the output, I'm going to select, let's say these 4 tracks here. Let's look at our routing. So I'm going to go, instead of to the drum folder, I want to send these all to, let's say the left output. I'm going to hold down the shift key and the alt or option key. So alt or Option plus the Shift key. And I'm going to say, let's send these all to the left. So now these are all sent. Let's see if it's... It's like just the first one changed because it's a folder track. So let's say if I... So I guess the first thing is, if it's a folder track, it will select that. So let me just come over and see if it's not a folder track. I'll disable the group channel. And now let's try the right channel. So it's probably because it's in a folder with group channel. And let's see if we now enable the group channel. Let me just try this again. So if it's kind of, not allowing you to switch multiple ones, it's because it's going to be in. Oh, now it worked this time. So try. Okay, so even though we're in a folder with group, hold down the Option key. So I'll do like these 3 tracks here. We can see that the output is set to drum folder. Hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key, and then just change the output routing here. So let's say I'll make it all to the stereo out, and then we could override the folder with group track to the group track. So Alt or Option, then hold down Shift, and then just simply change it, and all the selected channels, the outputs will change to what you selected. So we see Tony Trenzo says, Greg, can I ask questions on VST Live here? Sure, you can ask questions on any Steinberg product is fair game. So. All right. All right, we see Val joining from Vienna. All right, so we have Giedris Zara says, oh my God, that really helps. Great, we see Val sending the coolest and grooviest greetings from Vienna. So. Val just mentioning they had the best week. Everybody, thanks for the last years. Cubase is still king. Okay, so going through reading through comments here. All right, Beverly 6710. A great question. Can you show us an overview of tonalic? Can you change specific notes in the music segments, or are they static based on the chord track? So you could change the notes a little bit. So I'm not a tonalic expert, but let's just start here quickly. All right, so tonalic is kind of almost like virtual session musicians. It's a product by Celemony, and it integrates with Cubase since 1503. So let's say, okay, I'm looking for electric guitar parts, and I'm gonna just place a quick chord track in my project here. Great, so I want E minor, say, or that major, so All right, so say we want this as our chord progression. Let's just this minor. Okay, so now what we want to do is to be able to, we could audition kind of different guitar parts here. All right, so I'm going to take that guitar part and we could drag this guitar part out. All right, so I will come over here. Let's just drop our tempo, say 88. We'll drop our tempo a little more. All right, so we could just kind of copy this event here. And this will follow our chord progressions. All right, so when we want to edit like an individual note, even though it is audio, it's a real musician playing this part. So when we come over, we could double click and we could get like some different variations on this. So let's say I want to, we'll duplicate all of our events here. All right, and then when we come back from like this time when I come over here, I'm going to select this little tonalic, we'll call it this event in here, and we click right over here, and we could see almost like a MIDI representation of what's going on. So now if I want to edit an individual note, we could just come over here. So I want to change the pitch of this note to make it higher. I want to, so as we listen to it, so we can say, okay, I want this note here. So I could just take that one particular performance and say, so now let's say, okay, I want to take this note and move it to, let's say, a G natural there. So as we listen to it, and if we wanted to kind of change the timing of notes, I want that kind of segment to start a little later or earlier. So you have some, it's not, it's kind of MIDI style editing, but, it's kind of using some of the DNA technology that Cellmony has developed so that we could take individual notes and be able to modify them kind of with the flexibility of MIDI. So, but now if we wanted to, so let's say if we have our guitar parts, if we want to add other instruments, we could just kind of jump back here. These would follow our tempo, follow our chord track. So you can say, okay, I'm looking for drums. So say, and you may often get like previews of different instruments. So let's say I want that. Then we could also just kind of come over here and say, okay, I want to transition going into the next part. So I could just say, okay, I want this as a drum transition. if I want to throw like a bass part in. So since we have the chord track, I can just kind of now have are all following the chord track. So again, if you want to kind of edit like individual notes, come here, go to the lower right hand corner, and then you could kind of edit. It's editing audio, but it's kind of like the same paradigms as MIDI. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Beverly. All right, so we see from Val says, hope you're doing fine over in Alexandria, doing great. Can we change the color of the text in the info line? Mine is orange. I want to change that. All right, so my info line, like when something is, my audio input is not connected, I see that, but generally everything is white. Don't think that's that there's settings for the text colors. Usually it's kind of so let's say we're just here. I've never seen it orange before. Like maybe something is kind of like a warning message, like there's no input connected here, but think it should be kind of a black background and white. I will just take a quick look, but I don't think that is a preference. So I'm not sure if you experiment with different color schemes. So let's say it's so even kind of switching to different color schemes, it's like the text is always white. If you want to send me a screenshot, I'd be happy to take a look at it, but let me know if you modified any of the settings. But usually they try to make it, they actually have kind of a program, like, depending on your color, like if this color was, bright yellow, we may see that, if we come over here, this is super bright yellow, that track may turn, like the text would be black, just have the higher level of contrast for easier readability. So, when stuff, so some stuff may change color, may change between black and white fonts depending on what has the highest contrast. But if you want to send a screenshot to me, and let me know if you send it, I could take a quick look. But I haven't seen any orange color text. I've just kind of seen everything white with a black background. Great. All right, so we see Balsa joining from Montenegro. Great to see you back. So we see, is there a keyboard shortcut to show / open the mixdown folder, or at least the project folder? So we could, let's see if we go to our project setup. So we'll go to our project menu, to our project setup. I'm not sure if we can navigate to it here. All right, so let's come over here. So I'll go to this project that we were in before. All right, so let's go to our project folder, our project setup. You could also hit Shift+S And then you'll see the project location, and then you could say show in Finder or show in Explorer. So you could just go directly to the project file. So directly right there. So that's kind of a quick way to do it. So if you hit Shift S, say show in Finder, and that will take you directly to the project folder. So you can see the audio folder. If you had a mix down folder, it would all be available right there. So go to, again, the project setup, either from the bottom of the project menu or Shift plus the letter S, and click on, I believe if you're in Windows, it would say show in Explorer or show in Finder for Mac OS. So you see from Roar 140 says, guys, do you think the Cubase Artist 15 license is enough for most users? What are the crucial differences between artists and pros? The price difference is huge. So I think it's kind of commensurate with the number of features, but when in doubt, there's usually like Cubase comparison chart that is online. So there's, lots of people do great work in Cubase, LE that comes with their third-party interface or elements. But if you come over here, you could just compare the different Cubase versions. So, it could be, okay, with this version, I get this particular plugin, like, maybe I'm not doing orchestral work, or something like that. So depending on what your workflow is, you could see, you have the same instruments and libraries, you get some additional effects, you're going to have Dolby Atmos support, how many loops, side chaining support. So this will give you kind of, for general features. So number of group channels is more. So if you need to do more than 32 groups. So, but this will give you kind of a good overall walkthrough of comparing between what functions, are in Cubase Pro that aren't found in Cubase Artist, and they're kind of broken down by different sections as well. So I would check that out. So I just did a Google search for Cubase comparison chart and went to the Steinberg site. So even if we just go to Steinberg and come over here, say Cubase. So let's get to our Cubase page, and then click on comparison, and then you could see exactly what functions are there, so you could find that pretty easily. So you see from Sabretooth Bicycle, it says, I'm getting closer, trying to follow the Project Logical Editor demos, but nope, brain still goes to mush. No worries, I'll just keep coming back. So, how I got into, the logical editor was kind of a, it's often considered like Boolean logic. It's a pretty typical computer programming thing of if this, then that. But the first time when I got into it is when I needed it. So, I've told a story before, but I was doing like the song that we did the tempo detection on earlier. We did MIDI drums, like an electronic drum kit with live cymbals. And we found that every time that the drummer went to the ride cymbal, that it was triggering the tom pad below, like a velocity of like 40. So we were getting a lot of like weird tom stuff every time the drummer went to the cymbal. So I just, instead of having to search for kind of the errant, the false triggers from the ride cymbal that was sending it to the drum pad below, I just set up a condition to, delete every, F1 note that has a velocity less than 40. So sometimes when you're in a situation figure out how you could use the logical editors to solve a situation. And then it becomes, you have an emotional attachment that it's created a solution for you. Some people may go their entire Cubase workflows without utilizing the logical editors, and that's fine. But when you need them, when you're kind of down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh, I'd totally mess this up, it'd be so great if I could do this, there's probably a logical editor workflow that can help with many situations. So if you find a situation, Tim, that you like, okay, I just can't figure out how to do this, I think a logical editor might be able to help, let us know and we could show you kind of the logic of it. But basically, when you're looking at the logical editors, we could think of it, conceptually, we want to, do we want to delete something, select something, deselect something, or transform something? So transforming is changing. All right, so we have in our top area, what do we want to change? And the middle area here is how we want to change it. So we want to take our tracks that are not selected. So that's kind of if this. So these are tracks that are not selected. And what I want to do is to toggle the inserts. So this is kind of like your condition. This is what you're doing it to. This is what you're doing to this information. So once you kind of get into it, I know people have a hard time wrapping their heads around it. It's a certain mindset. I wasn't of that mindset myself, but after getting into many situations and answering questions like, oh, you could just do a logical editor, because like these little scenarios that pop up, that the logical editor is a great solution for that. See, Uno Memento from Finland wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so we have Idris Zara. Can I ask a beginner's question? You can ask any question you want. So the only, so beginner's question, most advanced question, we'll try to help. Okay, so he says, it says, I have a long WAV file, about 3 hours long. I need to mark 2 to 3 minute segments. In some places, copy them to another track for editing. Okay. It says, in short, what is the smartest way to mark short segments? And that can be copied, exported, etc. What's the smartest way to do this? Okay. All right, so let me just find kind of a... All right, so we'll imagine that this is a 3 hour file or whatever. All right, so what we could do is just come over here, and let's say if I take that section, so let's say if I, I'll just add an audio track below it. All right, so I could come right over here, and then I could just take like those sections. I'm using the range tool. So we could select events with our, with the selection tool. But if you go to the second tool here, you could have a range tool. So we could just come right over here. Now, as we do this, this is still all of the same audio file. So if you want to, at this point, select multiple events, so we could just go to your audio menu. If we want these all as separate events, we could just say bounce selection. And we could also just come over here. If you want to, so if we want these as separate events that are maybe like a 2-minute portion, and we have the 3 hour file, but we want just that 2-minute portion, what I would do is, so these again are all the same audio file. They're just kind of spread to different tracks. You would go to your edit menu, and there's a render in place. You can go to your render settings, and we can do this as one event, or you can do this as separate events. So I'm going to select the track here, and we could now come over and say, let's get to render in place. I want these as separate events. We could include the effects if we want. So let's go to render. And now we have kind of just ours, and I'll do this without the track being armed forward. So we'll say, again, edit to render in place. Let's use my current settings. And now each of those files is now a smaller, separate portion of the file. So this is a much smaller size file than these particular. So this is all one audio file where we're kind of telling the audio to start playing from the middle to here, and then start playing later on a portion of that to here. But once we have those selections done, you can just come right over and go to render in place. And now we could have, like, if it's 3 hours of a jam session and you want to just copy those particular parts and have a smaller audio file that's more manageable, at that point, again, go to your render in place, and you want to render. You could select the track, make sure no events are selected, select the track, and make sure that the mode is set to separate events. And now it'll create new audio files directly below that are smaller versions that aren't a portion of the larger file, but just a new version just containing the smaller sections like that. So let me know if that is helpful for you. Great. So we see TrackQuest music, just as yes, thanks, Greg. All right, so we see Brian from Alabama. I used to live in Huntsville when I was a little kid. Is there a way to turn off all plugins, not just bypass? All right, so let's come over here. All right, so I'll just add some inserts on this particular track. All right, so plugins can have two different states. They can be bypassed or disabled. So let's say we have all these plugins on our particular track. So when we come over here, we could bypass them. But if we hold down your Alt or Option key, we could disable. So we see the color difference. So like this is a black background, this is a darkened background. So this means that this plugin is disabled. So if you so now let's say if we want to turn off those, and again, I think it's just the same Project Logical Editor preset that we were doing before. So I'll remove this condition. Set it to is selected. Okay, so now when we come over here, those are all turned off, not bypassed. So again, if I come over here and let's go to this one, we can see that that is bypassed, but in the logical editor, the track operation, is again to enable or disable, and we just toggle that. So we could just say, so we will use to enable or disable all the plugins just right there. And you could assign a keyboard shortcut from that. And again, when I hold down, let's say my control key or command key will bypass, Alt or Option will disable, command or control will bypass, but that logical editor preset will turn off the plugins, disable them as well so they don't consume any CPU usage. So again, transform, container type is track. You can do it for all tracks. If you want it just for the selected tracks, you can say property is set to is selected. If the track selection doesn't matter, you don't have to add that. And then you can just say enable insert slot by number, do it 16 times. We could toggle so that you don't have to have a separate command to turn off and turn on. And when you come over here, just you'll enter in your numbers of 1 through 16. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Sorry, find my spot where I was. All right, Jackie Barr says, starting to try out the chord features, but it keeps spelling F sharp as G flat, even though I have the project set to B major. What am I missing? All right, so I'm not sure where you set the project to, but let's say we add a chord track. Great. So let's say I start here in B major. Cool. This F sharp. Right. So right now we see this as, I realize it's an odd choice, but we'll come over here. So let's say we go back to B. Just add a couple more. We'll do an E major and an F sharp. All right, so let's say I'm going to just select these two chords, and then we'll see kind of enharmonic shift. Set that to sharp right there, and then you could toggle. I'm not sure what the logic is if you're in B major for G flat. I understand the pain, but if you just go to the enharmonic shift here, we could just say switch that to sharp there. So it comes up periodically with some stuff. But just, select all of those chords. You can hold down the control or command key for all the F sharp chords and want them all to just change the enharmonic spelling right there. All right, you see Brian Sawyer from Yuma, Arizona. It says cooling off at 114 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think that's probably like 44 or 45 degrees Celsius for those that are interested. Where Brian lives, it's hot. All right, so Tony Trunzo says, Greg, I want to use plugins at a live gig using VST Live. Can you please show how to route and explain how to do it if possible? I'm new to VST Live. I'm not a VST Live expert, but yeah, I'll show you. So let's come over here. Oh, let me just do this real quick. Sorry. get the license sorted out here. All right, should be good. All right, so VST Live is kind of a like live production software. So if you're doing live performances, okay, so I'll just so let's say I just want to use my panorama, my controller. See if I have. Right, so we'll come over here. So let's add, I think we would just add a layer. Let me just, right, so we're gonna add a quick song. Do my Mac OS permissions dance here. Okay, so we'll come over here. We just need to add. Okay, so we're going to create a quick MIDI track. If I need to set up a song first. So I'll just come over here. Let's add, let's say, brand. Usually have a song. I haven't run this in a while, so I apologize, but Let me see if I had that one project that might help me. Okay, so let's say we have a song, so let's add this point. Sorry, I haven't worked with this in a while. I will probably maybe see if I could do this on Friday. So I could be prepared to show it on Friday. Or if you want to email me, I could figure out how to get it up and get the project. I usually kind of start with the project, but it's not showing me my project. So, but if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of get it figured out so I could help you out better with that. So, sorry about that, Tony. All right, so we have Rocks Rolls Production, just subscribed from Denver, Colorado. It's a beautiful city. Been there a bunch of times. All right, Vince is really enjoying his coffee today. It's good. All right, we see Peter joining from Montreal. Hope you're well. Thanks for being online with us. All right, we see Mark Raven joining from Montana. Thanks for with his dog Stella. Everyone give a big woof to Stella, his dog. Mark Ravens are sent a woof from Stella to us all. All right, Brian Sawyer wants everyone to not forget to hit the like button. Beverly is looking forward to hearing some cowbell. Incorporate it in my next drum example, hopefully. Right, so Beverly says, Greg just found out per your demo Tonalic that I cannot edit individual notes by clicking the lower right corner of Tonalic app unless I upgrade. So now I know why I can edit single notes. I didn't know the difference. I just have kind of the full license. Sorry about that. But it is a possibility. So Beverly says the quality of the guitar sounds are top quality. I'll think about upgrading to a full version if I use the guitar more in my songs. All right, we see Jazz Dude just says a trial version can be adopted when using to act like Elements or Artist or Pro with a special key. Greg can show it. So if you want to like start Cubase, I will open up Cubase 14 real quick just to show this. If you hold down the Alt or Option key when you're starting the program, so I will come over here. We'll just say, because when you buy a Cubase, you get kind of all the versions, and depending on the license, the different features are activated. So if I was starting Cubase 14, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key right after double clicking on it. We will get kind of this window where you could select a program version. So if you have Cubase Pro, you could see, and you need to check, you have a friend that's running Cubase Elements, and you want to be able to make sure that the file you're sending them will load up in Cubase Elements. Just double click while holding down the Alt or Option key, and then you could start, your Cubase, say if you had Cubase Artist, you couldn't run Pro, but you could run Cubase Artist and lesser versions. And if you have Cubase AI, you could run Cubase LE or Cubase AI, so you could run lesser versions of your license. But if you have Cubase Elements, you're not going to be able to run Pro this way. So this would allow you to run other versions of the program, so you can test it out for compatibility. Great. Go ahead, exit out of Cubase 14 so don't get confused later. All right, so we see Rick from Bratman Studio in Whittier, California. Thanks, great to see you on. He's received 1 gallon of coconut almond ice cream from Michael Teams. You see from Tim K is Sabertooth Bicycles. As I do remember some of the basic commands from back on the Commodore 64, but I think you're right. It'll take solving a real challenge to make it click. Yeah, once you create a couple, then you kind of see and understand the logic and the potential of it. So. You see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. See 1 gallon of black cherry ice cream. All right, so we see from Gidrius Zara says, thanks, but is there a non-destructive method? I don't want to just cut it out because it's very easy to get lost. So when you have done the cuts here, these edits are non-destructive. So if so even though we kind of cut the audio, we moved it down. Let me just hide these 2 tracks here. So this is non-destructive here when we just kind of move the different sections down. So it's so you don't want to just cut it because it's very easy to get lost. So you could also, so let's say if I'll just start fresh. Let's say we have an atmosphere file here. So even if I just hold down my Alt or Option key, I can just make a copy of that section without affecting the original file. So just holding down your Alt key would allow you to just copy that range selection. So this isn't altered in any way visually. And now if you want to, select the track and go into the render in place, then we could make it destructive if you wanted to. Sometimes, so now we have just these particular audio files. So as we work with it, so you could treat it non-functionally, but sometimes, I will have someone who opens up like a live concert file and they're working in very audio and they're like, wow, it's really slow. It's because you have a 3-hour audio file that you're doing very audio tuning in. So sometimes breaking it down into smaller size files, can make working with plugins and processing more manageable. But if you just want to leave, again, the original file is intact, that's non-destructive, but if you want to just copy the range out, you could do that as well. So let me know if that's helpful. Great. Mark Raven just mentions this is a perfect example why this type of tutorial is so valuable. There's no way to write/read this type of action. You have to see it in action with the range selection to understand the flow. So hope it's always helpful for people. Okay, we see Mark Raven says follow up from the last email about direct routing. It was summing, I think, but that brings the next question. What does direct route summing mode really do that the master fader is not? So if we have, let's jump to a different project here. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's say if we want to do often what we see in parallel processing is sending a track to, multiple groups. That we will take our drums here. All right, so let's say if we are working with direct routing, and what direct routing is going to allow us to do is we could send all of our tracks to a group. So let's say in this case, we have all of our drums going to a drum group. So we're in a folder group now. So when I come here, I could adjust all of my drums. But maybe if we wanted to do direct routing, we could send it to another group. So I'm going to add, just outside of this track, I'm going to add a group channel. Okay. And for this group channel, I'm just going to set the output to stereo out. So it's now kind of within the group channel. But if we go to direct routing and I want to send it so direct routing is part of the mix console. You may have to go to your setup sections and see direct routing. I will close my inserts, my routing, so we could see. So a lot of times what the original intention with direct routing was that maybe you could automate stuff for post-production. So that was kind of the original intention. Like if you're going from, like this, you go from the kitchen into a living room, and the kitchen has tile everywhere, and the living room is carpeted, and you have a character that's going back and forth. So we could have one group, let's say that was our carpet, and one group that was in the living room, and one that was set up for a different ambient of the kitchen, more reverberant. So when we go to direct routing, if I come over and let's say I could send all these tracks to I'm going to select all my drum tracks, and I want to send all these tracks to my initial group, but I want to select the tracks here. And I'm going to also activate direct routing and say we want these to go to group 2. All right, so now they're all going to group 2, but we may, when we come over, if we don't have direct routing summing mode on, we're only going to be able to route to one particular group. So we see group 2 here. Nothing is going there. If I switch all of my drum tracks to come over to and say go to group 2, so I'll just do that. So if direct routing summing mode is turned off, we could only send it to one destination at a time. So I could send it to this group, or I could send it to this group. But with direct routing summing mode, when that's turned on, and it probably should be on by default, now it's being sent to both destinations. So the direct routing allows you to go from this being able to switch between different routing scenarios, like such as the different rooms, to being able to have it go to multiple destinations at once. So now I could come over, let's just do our standard compressor, and just kind of come right over here. So now I want to squash this channel, this group. So what this summing mode is going to allow you to do, and this is found in the mixer settings, is to send it to multiple destinations. So once the summing mode is on, then we could do very complex parallel routing schemes. So that's what the direct routing does. See, Jazz Dude is recommending everyone learn the arranger track, and Mark Ravenson, yes, best thing helps him finish songs, and then he finds it to be magic. Sorry, just my chat field jumped again. So we see from Bratman Studio, Greg, man, Halligan is Halligan 7.5 deep. We may need you to do a whole session just on 7.5. So you could probably do a whole session just on one of the types of instruments. Yeah, it is incredibly deep. It's incredibly powerful. So, I'm just always amazed at what the kind of the Halligan team is able to do, and also just paying attention to make sure that the audio integrity is always at the highest level as well. Okay, so we see from Beverly, says, Greg, please demonstrate adding the VST synth to a track, and then in the inspector under MIDI inserts, activate the quarter. Please explain what is going on with the quarter. All right, so let's come over here. All right, so let's say I just have All right, so let's say like I'm a terrible keyboard player, as everyone knows who's been on a live stream. All right, so I just play block chords. I should practice after all these years, but you know, I'm busy doing other stuff. So I want to be able to play cool chords, but I can't play cool chords on a keyboard. I'm a bass player. I'm a dumb bass player. So I want to be able to come over here. So again, this is one that's great for playing around with some of the presets. So as we come over, we can now trigger different chords. So we could just say, okay, we want to, you know, so you could do just kind of one octave of chords that you're triggering. So, or you could do kind of all keys. So there's different types of, so this would, and if you wanted to edit the chords, you can just kind of specify which notes are in the chords, but you know, check out some of the you know, basic presets. So as you play, I'll just turn off the edit chords. Sorry about that. But as you kind of come over here, say, okay, I want to. So this way you could just say, okay, I want to play, you know, major seventh chord. And that allows you to trigger chords that you may not be able to play or have a single note trigger a chord. Great. All right, so we see main, Andy says, what's the best way to route reverb and delays to my vocal while recording without adding inserts to my channel? Okay, so if you want to have effects, let's say I'll take just a vocal part here real quick. All right, so I'm going to send this to a group track. Okay.
Do you recall?
All right, so, and I'm going to create an audio track here. So it'll say this is going to be my input. Go to group 3 is my input here. All right. So now.
The day we first met, that was a long, long.
All right, so let's say this is our record track, and we want to hear reverb and delay, but not have them as inserts. So I would just simply add it as, you know, when you come over here, you could have it as a send.
Time ago.
So
it was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our.
So, and let's add a delay. So I could right click and let's add an effects track to send to. So let's say I want a little bit of studio delay. Come over here. Let's make it maybe a dotted quarter note.
Yellow coach. Yellow coach. Do you recall the day
so this is
we
our
first met?
Input channel.
That was a long, long time ago.
Just have this, if you don't want it as inserts. So we have this.
7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach. Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
And then if you want to.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot.
If you hold down Alt or Option and double click the send, then you can edit it.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
So that way you could just use sends and hear the reverb and delay. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. And using it as sends, I see a lot of people will stack all of their insert chain with effects, and inserts are serial, meaning that if you had like the reverb and then the delay, then the reverb the sound goes into the reverb, then the sound after the reverb will get delayed and flanged and all the other processing. Whereas when we use sends, this is a parallel path, so the reverb isn't feeding into the delay. These are just kind of parallel paths. So let me know if that works and makes sense for you. All right. Oh, great to see George from Seattle. This is uncomfortably sunny Seattle. Is there a way to make Cubase more processing power threads? Use more processing power threads been worked in. Still seems to use about half of available. So, Cubase will utilize all of the threads that are available in the system. But when we deal with a lot of audio sources, so let's say if I have a plugin, like a plugin chain here, so it may see like a disparity between the audio performance and the threads. If you are working with like a VST instrument along the lines of, let's say, a Hallian or Hallian Sonic, we'll just come over. All right, so let's say if I come here and I'm running a Hallian Sonic instance, and within Hallian Sonic, I have 16 different instruments loaded up. Usually, if you're using multi-temporal instruments, that one instrument can only utilize a single CPU core. So if you have an instrument that's playing back 16 sounds and is playing 8 voices, you may get better performance depending on most instruments by playing that in 16 different instruments. If you break it across multiple instruments, those instruments will utilize different CPU cores. So depending on how your instrument is set up, and all DAWs work this way, it's just the serial nature of the beast of doing real-time audio processing. Hallian and Hallian Sonic will have a multi-core option. So you could just come over here and allocate that this instrument uses multiple cores. That's pretty rare for VST instruments. Sometimes when utilizing a plugin that has if we have a track that has lots of different effects on it, like inserts, sometimes, people will use, as we were talking just previously, different inserts, and they'll have a reverb on each of the inserts or multiple plugins. So if we have a plugin chain that looks like this, all of the plugins in this project, in this track, will only utilize one CPU core. So that could bring down what the audio performance is. So, but you look at your CPU monitor or your activity monitor, and you may say, oh, I have more cores that are available. So, depending on how the project is set up is how that can scale across to multiple cores. So when you do actual performance tests, you'll see that there's there's different techniques that you could use to kind of spread your project out so that it utilizes multiple or more CPU cores. But Cubase will utilize all of your efficiency cores, all of your processing cores. So it's a cool thing to, they
seventh grade
spend a lot of time to make sure it works. But sometimes if people overload by how their project is set up, they can overload a single core, and that could bring down the audio performance of the whole system. I think I have a file that we could show this with. So, audio performance that we see in Cubase and the CPU performance, are two separate things. They're kind of related, but, uniquely different. So just give you an idea. And this project has like one plugin, which has like 8 plugins within this particular preset. So let's say if we are looking at just all right, so I have in this case an audio track, and this is kind of nonsensical audio, and will probably sound terrible, so I'll turn the volume way down. All right, so we open up. So on this audio track, I'm going to have, let's get to the inserts. Let's revert quickly. Let's see if the one. Okay, so let's say on this track, I will just go ahead and enable this track here. So I have my one audio track. And this has like 8 of this one plugin, and this plugin is like a really intense preset that has basically 8 plugins within it. All right, so all the other tracks are disabled except for this one particular track. So when I'm doing this, I am overloading this one track. I'm overloading its CPU core, running all of these plugins in serial. So as we work everything, this audio process has to go into this process, into this process. So this is all serial, and it's only going to utilize one processor core. So when I go to play it back, and this is like, I think probably one of the fastest MacBooks that you can get now with 64 gigs of RAM. Steinberg was super generous. And so let's come look at our audio performance monitor. So when we do this, we'll hit play. You can see that performance monitor, and you'll see dropouts. This isn't playing. So I'm going to take the same number of tracks and play one instance. So let's go ahead and disable the one track that had 8 plugins. And now I'm going to take all of these tracks with the same number of plugins, and we will enable those tracks. So it's the same number of plugins, but since these are on separate tracks, they're able to utilize and play back without problem. So let's go to the performance meter. So you can see that that's barely hitting. So it's running the same number of effects, but what it's doing is allocating each of these effects on the audio to different processor cores. So Cubase, and there's a whole team inside of Cubase, and there's a really interesting, if you want to look it up, maybe Jazz D could find a link. I think it was just posted last week. One of our developers, Eric Cray, who's just like super genius guy, did a talk at the Audio Developers Conference. I think it was in London. And he did like a 30-minute explanation, kind of discussing like some of the performance optimizations that they did and how they approached it, where they created kind of a whole program that would redraw like different aspects and stuff. It was a really interesting talk. So check out Eric Cray, ERICH and KREY at the Audio Developers Conference. I just watched the YouTube video yesterday. But Cubase will utilize all of it, but just how your project is set up, your project may not be able to access all of the cores, or maybe hitting some of the cores harder than others. Okay, so we see about the headphones question earlier. Says yes, but using Sens also keeps on monitoring my dry vocal to my headphones. I need a mic for my headphones to record I need a mic for my headphone and to record dry vocal. So when we do that, so it really what setting that you may be running into that may affect that is your direct monitoring status. So let's come over here. So when we are in direct monitoring, see if I still have this routed. All right, so yeah, so I think we're all right.
First met. That was a long, long time ago.
All right, so we'll come over here to this track.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach. Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
So let me just.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach.
Great. So let's just.
Coach, do you recall the day?
Let's check of the
day we first met. That was a long, long time.
All right. So all right, so just to go back, says yes, but using Sens also keeps on monitoring my dry vocal to my headphones. I need a mic. I need a mic for my headphones and to record dry vocal. So that will record the dry vocal, but let's say if I come over and I have direct monitoring turned on, so we'll go to your studio setup, select your audio interface, and when we have direct monitoring enabled, direct monitoring sends the input signal directly to the output, and it bypasses the audio engine, kind of mitigating latency issues. So now I don't hear the effects.
That was a long,
so, and if we want to, so let's go ahead and I'll monitor.
It was 7th grade in the school park.
So make sure that you don't have direct monitoring turned on. So, that way we could monitor with the dry vocal, with the headphones, but we could monitor with effects, but these effects aren't printed. So when using it as an effect send. All right, we see from Jay the Jolly. He says, hello, Greg. I recently replaced my 10-year-old Beyer Dynamic DT990 ohms with DT900. I'm amazed and loved the more tame sound. Do you have experience with Beyer Dynamic? I don't have any Beyer Dynamic equipment, but one of my colleagues who used to work at Steinberg with me, Martin Stahl, he's now like head of the professional products at Beyer Dynamic in Germany. So, and he offered to get me free stuff. I should hit him up. But I've always had just a great respect and admiration for Beyer Dynamic equipment, and I think like their headphones are great. Obviously, their ribbon microphones, I've always wanted one, but I think it's kind of we'll say it's a German cliche of really super high quality, high performance audio equipment. CJ Ajay says he feels like Beyer Dynamic is the best mix of great sound and great comfort in the price range, but that's subjective, of course. Yeah, and I know my friend Martin is like super capable, super smart guy, and he's going to do great things. I think he just celebrated his 3rd-year anniversary at Beyer Dynamic. So he's an incredibly smart guy. So Beyer Dynamic's in a great position with him at the company. Jackie Barr says, another question. How do you make the chord pads and chord track match And is there a way to capture the chord names as text for copying and pasting elsewhere? So if we want, so let's say we have a chord track. Let me open up a different project. It has a chord track in it. All right, so we have, let's say, our chord track here. Right, so say as we're, and if I go, so it looks like we're in C major, C minor 7, D chord, A minor, F major. All right, so I go to the chord pads. So here I see just kind of like major. So I'm gonna come and say, we see this little icon here. You can say assign from the chord track. So now it's gonna take all the chords that are in the chord track and populate the chord pads right here. So now I could come over here. And these are all the chords that were used in the song. So that's how you could kind of synchronize the two. So once you have the chord track populated, and if you have, you know, a chord in the chord pads, you can drag that to the chord track wherever you see fit. But again, just once the chord track is populated, to have those go to the chord pads, just click right here, and that will assign the chord pads, the chords from the chord track to the chord pads. And you see, is there any way to capture the chord names as text for copying and pasting elsewhere? We could take this into, let's say if I create a blank part and I go into the score editor for that part, we could see that the chords are automatically carried over. But I'm not sure if we could export it as text. But if it was, don't know a way to, so if you wanted to print out charts, you could do this. Just kind of creating a blank part with, the chord charts there, but I don't know if text where it could be kind of copied out. But if you wanted to make a lead sheet based on that, you could. So if you're just wanting to kind of print it out somewhere, you could make a lead sheet from the score editor. But I don't know a way to export it as text. Don't think it would be, a MIDI file probably wouldn't be read. But yeah, I don't know a way to do it. I could think about it a little more throughout the live stream, but you can print it out if needed with the chords and with the musical arrangements by viewing it in the score editor, and the score editor will automatically show the chord track. Great. Some discussion on mixing with headphones. All right, so you see from Jazz Dudes is just mentioning that Nuendo has a headphone compensation files, and Jade Jolly is asking if that is possible in Cubase. So that is a Nuendo specific feature. So the headphone match, so it could kind of work with different different headphone manufacturers to kind of match the frequency response. So at this point, it is a Nuendo specific thing. A lot of people use headphones for mixing binaurally, so it is kind of a Nuendo specific thing. Maybe it'll end up, a lot of Nuendo specific things eventually end up in Cubase, so maybe we'll see that in the future, don't know. All right, so we see from Jada Jolly, is it possible in Cubase to change the preset of a VST via a MIDI command? So if I wanted to, so let's say if it's an audio effect, so let's say if I come over here to multi-tap delay and we have presets. So I think if we go, let's get to MIDI remote. So I'm just going to use MIDI remote. I think there's a next preset. I think that there is a like a next preset type. Let me just see if program. Let me see if we can. So we can see there is a keyboard keyboard shortcut. I'm pretty sure of it. Let me see. Okay, preset previous. So let me try that, and I'll apply the mapping. Let's do next. All right, so if we come here, we could just say, so when I hit that, we could just load up the next and previous preset like that. We could also send MIDI program changes. Not a lot of VST instruments will do VST program changes, but you could just come right over here and assign the so under preset category, look for next and previous. So, and then the active plugin, you could just simply go through and switch and navigate through different presets if you want to audition. And that's just using the MIDI remote or key command. So let me know if that's helpful. It will work for your setup and workflow. All right, so we see George is giving a big woof to Stella. All right, we see Pastoral Apologetics checking in from Southeast Texas. It says, as per usual, we're blessed to have your tutelage. I've been a user since Cubase with a lighter version on regular systems when the plugins that have been re-released for free were new. Yeah, so it's a nice stroll down memory lane. I remember when Neon first came out and trying to explain to people in 1999 that, you know, at some point we won't have hardware instruments. It'll all be software. You know, everyone will switch to be using software, and they're all like, "Oh, you're crazy," you know. So how times have changed, but it's been great to be on the right side. All right, so you see question, how can I listen the Media Bay content through the stereo bus or any bus so I could check a spectrogram, control room setup didn't work. If I didn't activate it, I can't listen on Media Bay. All right, so let's come over here. Let's get to our Media Bay. I'll go to my control room first, and let's get to the insert plugin. And here I'll just open up Supervision. We will switch this to spectral bar. Okay, so I have this. Let's now come over to Media Bay. I'll just make sure that we could audition our loops and here through here. So let's as I click here, you know, you could have inserts in the control room. This is from Luis Alejo. Says, you know, listen to Media Bay content or any bus. I could check on the spectrogram. The control room setup didn't work because if I activate it, I can't listen on Media Bay. You know, so let's take another. So it should work, you know, with your Media Bay, with control room. So let's say if I come over here, let me go to my audio connections. Usually when people can't hear their Media Bay preview, so I'll turn off my control room. And let's say, you know, and I will turn on my audio connection here. All right, so my Media Bay is disabled. I'm going to, so now we're auditioning through my stereo bus. So if I put on, let's say my mix console, yeah, so you may not see it because it doesn't currently have a home. So let's say if we come over here, it's not being routed through. So that's kind of, you know, but let me know if you have, you know, if your audio connections in the outputs is set to not connected and your control room is activated, then, as we go to audition, we could just see our control room meters here. So we open this up, and as we audition, okay, again, let me just open. It's because the audio doesn't have a home yet. So this is kind of, one of the premises of the control room, since it's not routed to any sources yet because it's not in a project, that we could just preview here and see the plugin. But again, let me know if, usually make sure that you have like the media, your audio connections here and the outputs set to not connected, and see if you're still hearing it through Media Bay. Okay. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Find my spot, sorry. All right, so we see Pastoral Apologetics as our company does orchestral and stage band recordings, and we've now gone exclusively Cubase. It used to be in our arsenal, but for about 3 years, it's been our workhorse. That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that. It's great. Yeah, I mean, Cubase is really robust for live recording. All right. So you see Mark Raven says, so summing mode allows for mults. It says, yeah, that you can think of it just like that. It's probably a much more succinct explanation. And we see from Mark Raven, it says, thank you, Greg. Woof. Everyone give a woof to Stella. Greg Noble says, Steinberg needs a shirt that says, my dog can beat up your dog. So we're not that insecure about it. So it sounds like a good item that could be merchandised on the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just saying next Friday with a guest. Don't miss it for the next Zoom. So Zoom will be this upcoming Friday. And again, we'll have a special guest, Bob Bullock. Looking forward to you all meeting him. Jazz Dude sharing some work. All right, so you see George Nowick just saying, context, I like Paint so much he recreated Michael Brower's template in Nuendo with all the plugins and effects. It spikes and less buffers get pushed way out, but that makes the faders behave funny. Yeah, I mean, there could be some some different settings if he's running like a DSP based system, but it could be similar as well. So see, George says he wants to eat his cake and have ice cream too. Yeah, Georgia. And one of the things that you might also consider doing is if you don't have tracks on, you could disable the tracks, and that would disable like all of the plugins on that particular track. I haven't really checked out the template, but sometimes, people will do, mimic like analog routing on a console, where you're not eating up DSP, but you have, $80,000 of hardware if you're using, and try to mimic that exact thing in software, and realize that it may behave a little differently. But I'll see if you want to share the template with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it and see if there's any suggestions. You could send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Interesting fact about George, this will be a future trivia question. He plays a stick Tony 11. The fellow bassist. So Mark Rabin has to take off. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see from Idrius Zara says vocal chain plugin is super laggy. So it's the vocal chain plugin is a high latency plugin, but it is like one plugin. It has like 16 plugins inside of it. So we could think of the compounded latency of each of those together. So, a lot of times I wouldn't use the vocal plugin. So if we just come over here, let's get to the vocal chain. Like often I wouldn't use the vocal chain because, it is like during tracking, because it's going to be like, really high latency overall. So if I come over here, let's set up the sections, we could see our latency figures. So we can see the vocal chain is 236.3 milliseconds. So it is, but again, this is not a plugin that I would tend to track through or have on during tracking. I would use it for mixing. So. See, Mark Rabin just says, Greg, thank you, Greg, for indexing of the questions, and Jan for the index. So, yeah, Jan made all the indexing I do useful. So, and I'm always appreciative of that. It's great to have him back from vacation. Great. See some discussion of audio Ritter. Haven't you? Okay. Reading through comments here. George is also mentioning if you don't have 3 backups, you don't have 1 backup is so much truth. All right, so we have Andy Schaller joining from southern Germany, and apologizing for being late. The only thing you have to do if you're late is just hit the like button immediately. So, but we're just glad that you're able to join us. Mento wants everyone to whack the like button. See, Soren just mentioned that maybe Dolly Parton passed. So sorry to hear that. I had a lot of friends worked with her on her album. I got to meet her once in the airport in Nashville. So great songwriter. My friend Gary Pachoza did a number of albums with her. So there's some great Dolly Parton stories. It's like how she would always come prepared, and she would. An interesting Dolly Parton story is like when she'd always want to try to get everything in as few takes as possible, and so she would drive around, have her driver drive her around the neighborhood of where the studio was, and she would be practicing in the car, and then she'd just pop out and do the vocal, get back in the car. So sad to hear of her passing. So, incredibly talented. Great. So we see Luis Alejo just saying, looking for what you and Greg mentioned minutes ago about project optimization, audio dev talk about Cubase optimization for cores. It's not necessarily about optimization for cores, but it's kind of an interesting. Let me see if I could find it real quick. I think we get to. It's like. Yeah, there's an audio developers conference in Germany. Let's see if. Yeah, so if you come here to optimizing UI rendering, performance in Cubase and Nuendo. I think that this was just, it says 2025, but I think it's for 2026. So you could check out. So if you look for this, search for this on Google, I'm sure Jazz Dude can share a link. But from the Audio Developers Conference, so it's Eric Cray, one of the developers that makes Cubase work great on your computers. Super smart guy. But it's an interesting talk. So it's not necessarily about core optimization, but how he kind of went through and optimized like just the overall graphics performance and stuff that they do is really interesting. So, all right. So see that George's day job is interfering. So. All right, so we see Jonathan Eggle says, hi, Greg. Asked questions in the past. You seemed unsure how to pronounce my last name. So for clarity, it's pronounced Eggle. So let me know if that's wrong. All right, we have Tiago joining from Brazil. Thanks for being online and part of the community today. All right, so I see Jazz Dude sharing a link about Dolly Parton singing Jolene. All right. All right, so let's get to a question that was mailed in advance. All right, so open this up. All right. So first question we had mailed in was how to create and play back your own custom made arpeggios. Okay, so let's say I played a part here. All right, so I just want to take like maybe that little. So we'll take this whole phrase here. All right, so if we want to actually be able to play this, let's say I have this instrument sound loaded up, And I want to be able to take this particular pattern, and I'll just maybe do like the first part of it here. So I want to take this pattern and drag it over and be able to play that with different chords. So if we come over here, so what we could do is just go to the chord pads. All right, so let's say we have, and we could have this currently set to playing chords, so that when I play the chord pads, all right, so now what I want to do is take this arpeggio, this rhythmic pattern, and I could just drop it right here to drop MIDI pattern. So now when I play the chords, so now when I trigger a different chord, so, and people ask, oh, can I actually record that information? How do I get like that pattern playing the different chords into my project? So I'll just come over here, hit record, and so now we can take that pattern and just trigger it. And as we've done that, we can now just play this. When we double click, we can see it says if I spent all that time playing that particular pattern, that, you know, so if you have a tricky chord progression, you could kind of take one pattern and then play the chord pads through it. Now, another thing that you could do, another approach, could be just to come over here. And let's go to this track, and we'll see that we can have a plugin and a MIDI insert. So there's two different arpeggio plugins. One is called Apache SX. It's a later version, has more features, and I could take that particular chord arpeggio, and I'm just going to drag it on top. And now whatever chords I play, so as I play a chord, I could just have that pattern play it out for us. And we could use kind of that rhythmic pattern and the variations based upon the pattern that we created here. So we could play it with chord pads if we wanted to, or if we want to actually play the chords and have that rhythmic pattern, you know, so I could just hold a chord down and we want that rhythmic pattern, we could come over here and just say, I'll open up the virtual keyboard. So when I play, so I will take, you know, this particular part here, we now run it through the Apache SX. So now when I play, so now whatever chords that I play here, I'll knock it up an octave here. So if you want to actually play the chords and have that pattern triggered based on the chords that you're playing in, you could use the Apache MIDI insert plugin, or if you want to just play one single note that plays the chord that is now following that rhythmic pattern, that arpeggio, you can come over here and play one note and trigger the chord from the chord pads. So, and with both of those scenarios, you just kind of drag and drop a MIDI event into the MIDI plugin, or right to the top here where we could just say, let's just come over here and drop the MIDI part into the chord pad so you could trigger that particular editor. Great. Let's jump back. See if we have. All right. Gerald Ely's on. Says his worship band rehearsal later, so he has to grab a nap. Check the index later. So thanks for joining us. All right. So we have G Nick. It says late to the party, but here been busy. Great to see you on. All right, so we see Rick from Batman says, "Hey Greg, I was watching a video on Hallion 7 and Stephen Bedall gave you a big shootout for streaming Club Cubase, saying this guy named Greg Undo has an amazing knowledge of how Cubase works." Kind words. Thanks for mentioning it. I'm not sure if I've met him. I may have met him, but it's very kind of him. All right, Adam Langford asks, Greg, this may be a simple question. I have a 61 key keyboard for MIDI entry. If I want to adjust a range of notes, do I do that on a keyboard, or is there a setting in Cubase -1 octave, for example, using mostly VSTs? So a lot of people will do it, a lot of the MIDI controllers will have a transpose button, like you could transpose down, by a semitone or by an octave. So if I am coming here to this track and I put a MIDI monitor on, so I hit a note here. Let me just turn off and let's say I play. I'm hitting an F2, and if I hit my octave down on my controller, it switches to an F1, and I hit the octave up, I could go to F3. So, a lot of people may find that the easiest way to kind of work, but if you wanted to do it inside of Cubase, I'll leave the same MIDI remote on, and let's open up just so we could see. So I come here, and this is C2 that we're hitting, but we could set up, if you get to the project, if this is something that you're going to do all the time, and you don't, and let's say if you have menu diving on your particular keyboard that's hard to navigate. So let's say if we go to the project input transformer, you could come over here and say we want to transform MIDI notes, and then we could come over here, and there's probably a preset for this. We'll say our subtype, we want to subtract 12. So that's going to subtract 12 notes. So when this is on now, we could go to our channel, and then under the routing area, you could just say, okay, I want to use the project input transformer. So when I hit a note, let's see if we get all the windows arranged well here. So when I hit a note, we can see this is C1. If I turn this off and I hit the note, we could automatically transpose all the incoming MIDI data. So if you want to, instead of it transposing, taking the data that's there and transposing it down an octave. So again, you could come here to the project, so if both approaches get you to the, get you the goal, or the, get you to the end zone or the home run, just at different ways of approaching it, but both will get you there. So, I think a lot of people, I tend to just hit the octave down button on my controller. But if it's one of those things you have to go through, and I know how bad some basic things like that could be if you're menu diving on a keyboard and then you forget to turn it on and off, it could be confusing. But if that's the case, come here to your project input transformer and just say you want to say transform, click insert note, and then you want to select subtype and the subtype of a MIDI note message, because you think of the second value in a MIDI note message is the pitch. So select subtype and subtract 12. And then just to turn that on and off, you could just come right here in the routing area, say none. And as we play, and then if I turn this on, I choose project. Now I could just, for that particular track, hit one button and it's down an octave. So, but either approach from the controller or from Cubase, that will, give you kind of the same results there. All right. All right. So you see, Sable Winter just asking who our Zoom guest will be on Friday. So yeah, Bob Bullock. So super nice guy. He's also taught at colleges as well, taught at Belmont and I think at Auburn. Right. So we see from Adam Langford says that's great. Thanks, Greg. So you see Sable just asking, what is Bob Bullock known for? So he's mostly done, probably most of his career has been kind of in country music based in Nashville. So I think Kenny Rogers brought him out from California. He grew up actually very close to the Yamaha office. So I used to run into him at the NAMM show, often at the hotel near the Yamaha office because his mother lived in the area at the time. But so he started in Los Angeles, and then, moved to Nashville. I think Kenny Rogers brought him out to be his engineer in Nashville and, done Reba, George Strait, and, one of his biggest projects was probably like Shania Twain's big album when it sold like, 30 million copies with Mutt Lange. Produced like with She's the One and Man I Feel Like a Woman, and I think that album Bob did all the engineering on him. So, and super nice guy, and has been probably Nuendo user for 24, 25 years. All right, let me go to the next question that was mailed in. All right. So we see just a question. I've dragged my pattern to the project window. How can I have an independent track loop so that it continues to play? All right. So let's say if we have a pattern here. So some of the editors, like the audio editor or the MIDI editor, can have an independent track loop so that we could have part of the editor that is being built while we're working on other stuff. But if we have, let's say, our pattern here, so I'm just going to open up my pattern editor. So let's say we have my pattern going on here. And so we have this playing. So this in of itself we can think of the pattern editor as an independent track loop. So this isn't resident on the project window. So, and when I hit play, it's going to play and be synchronized. So we can think of this as a mini sub-sequencer within Cubase. Now the flexibility of the pattern editor is that we can drag the pattern out. So let's say if I'm here, I want to now have the part, not in its editor here, but we can have it playing from the project window. So if I wanted to now switch to, like, let's say, a different pattern here, we could now, so we will switch from pattern. All right, so, but you may notice that when we do this, that this pattern editor, when we're not playing, is silent because it's in the project window. So if we have stuff that's in the project window, we could, just come over here. If we do a new track version, let's just say we'll go back to our pattern editor here. I could, if I just turn this off, and you may have to hit this little speaker button that's for the play with project. So as soon as I do that, our pattern will start to play and kind of be in the actual independent track loop mode. So you don't have to have this pattern, you don't have to migrate it into the actual project if you don't want to, and you could just keep it in the pattern editor and it will play back perfectly synchronized in its own mini, sequencer format. We could think of it like that. All right. All right, so we see Beverly says, I think a cowbell is coming into the drum mix. All right, so we'll see how this pattern sounds if we add cowbell for Beverly. So it's just... And let's go ahead and do something interesting for Beverly with the modulators. So let's come over here. Let's do an LFO. Go back to your drum machine, to the cowbell, and let's adjust. Maybe we'll try. Let's adjust our tuning as well. So let's come back to our modulators. We'll make this, say I'll just do tuning. So come over here. And so now we could kind of modulate the tuning of the cowbell if you want. Now you got multiple cowbell sounds all from one cowbell. So going beyond what traditional cowbell technology envisioned. Great. So Just Asking says, hi everybody, sorry for being tardy today. Had some real life things, no problem. So we're always glad you can make it. You just had to hit the like button. All right, let me jump to some other questions. Some other questions that were mailed in. So question, is there an easy way to notate drum parts? Okay, so let's say if we have a drum beat here. All right, and we want to notate this. So now one of the cool things we have with Dorco, and you can think of some of the notation stuff, is like when you work with it, that, if you have a part that says piano or the grand even, it will open up into a grand staff. If the part is called bass, it will try to do a good job of naming it like put it into a bass clef. If it says clarinet, it would, put it into treble clef. So when I just have this part here, and when doing this, it's always good to have the drum map. So when we add an instrument here, we could just say, and I did this already, but you'll see an option if there's no, if you open up something like Groove Agent, you'll see this create drum map from instrument, which is what I did. So I could take my part here that is, playing along. And now if I want, so sometimes I will come over, and it can't hurt sometimes if you just say, okay, this is going to be drum set. All right, so now when I go into my notation editor, because like we look at, our bass drum is, our kick drum is going to be on C1, but, generally that's not the pitch that the kick drum is notated on when we do notation. When we come over here, let's say we have our snare is on D1, but that's not where snares are notated in notation. We see hi-hats on F#1. That's not where they're notated. So often when we do drum notation, there's no clef per se. So I'm going to, since we've assigned this to a drum map, when I open up my score editor, so just Control or Command plus the letter R, this will automatically, when figure out, since it's a drum set, if we go to our instrument settings, we could just come over here. We could say we're going to use this drum map. We could do a 5-line staff if you wanted to do a grid. Some people would do notation like that. If you have lots of orchestral stuff, you could have a single line instrument. So if you want to see everything kind of labeled out as a single line instrument, or we could just choose to do like a 5-line staff. So, and as we come over here, you can see like where the hi-hats open up. And we can see that all of the like multiple voicings. So, like when we're switching between like, your, like the hi-hats, like their stems are going the opposite direction. We'll see like this little circle indicates that that's like an open hi-hat. So this is kind of automatically derived so that it extracts it from the drum. So let's say if we go back to our beginning here. So if you just kind of, have a drum map that's associated with it, it will use the drum map as the basis so that when you open it up, that you don't have to sit there and configure like multiple voices, what cymbals you're using, map the C1 bass drum to either F or A, depending which clef you're oriented to, to E or C for the snare drum. That those aren't the pitches where the MIDI mappings are associated with. And we can see that this isn't the pitch that, this isn't F#1, but this is standard drum notation. So once you assign the drum map, then Cubase, using kind of the Dorco engine, will do all of the magic behind the scenes so that you just open it up and it's proper drum notation that you could hand off to someone in a session. Great. See, Tim K just says cows in pastures are wishing their cowbells could modulate. So it probably doesn't modulate as well. So it's one of those things that would drive my son has perfect pitch, and that would drive him crazy if there's like cowbells that are out of tune and two cowbells that are out of tune with each other. It's just like, it's like nails on a chalkboard to him. All right. Just asking says Greg has a funk going on today. Cowbell Funk, song title right there. Good band name too, Cowboy Funk. So be a Nashville project. And the album of Cowbell Nation, dedicated to Beverly. All right. All right, 54 Beatmaker R54 asks, if I use a send function, can I use a group track as an effects track in Cubase? What breaks if I do? So there's really no, there used to be like a minor difference that if we sent it to a group, let me just test it here real quick. I think they did away with the difference. They're very functionally the same. It doesn't matter as long as you, know how to get your audio to the effects end and can blend it. Whether some people used to be very argumentative about this, like with me. It's like, the sends are really just, an effects it's like the effects channels and groups are exactly the same. But it used to be that you could do routing on the effects ends, like independent routing on the effects ends, but not on the groups. But I think that distinction was gone away. So it's in essence the same thing, but let me just, I'll add a group channel. Great, and let's add an effects channel. And here we'll just put on the reverence. Okay, and on my group channel, I'm going to just on the insert, we're going to have the reverence. We'll load up the same preset between the two. So we have an effects channel and a group channel with descend. So we'll come over and play this. All right, I'll just slow it down to something a little less annoying. All right, so I'm gonna come over here. Let's get to our mixer. So we will send it to our reverence. All right, and so I'll just come here. Let's solo that. All right, so, and I'm going to send it to the group, which has the reverence on it. All right, so let's move this up here. So let's say now we have the group. So in years past, and this may have changed in like 9-ish or 10-ish, that when you sent it to a group, you couldn't pan it. But that distinction. So it's really the same exact functionality. It's just sometimes conceptually people, have could understand it. I'm sending it to an effect or I'm sending it to a group, but the group can do other things as well. And you could do other things in the effect track. So it's really, I think virtually the same now. The one minor distinction was kind of eradicated when they allowed the panning, from descend going into the group itself. So you're not going to break anything. You're fine and safe, and no one will hunt you down because you used a group channel instead of the effects. All right. See Jazz Dude sharing a video for CPU performance versus real-time performance. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says a real cowbell sample will make a great pad in Pad Shop. Let's give it a try real quick. So let's go ahead and come back to so shut off the modulator. All right, and I'll add a little decay on it. So let's come here. See if we could. All right, so, and just tune it a little bit. All right, so we'll make just a quick. Great, so I will. All right, so I'll just kind of draw a cowbell note in, and let's do some cool stuff with. Okay. So just show you how creative you could be, let's take just an ordinary sound. All right, and I'm going to render this in place to create an audio file. All right, so we have that. Let's open up an instance of Pad Shop. That was Gary Gibbons. I can make this sound really good. Guy's a genius. Pad Shop and many other things. All right, so we're going to take this sound in. I'll just load up a preset. I'm going to replace it with a cowbell sample. All right, so now I'm going to drag this cowbell sound over. See if let me just start it again from scratch. So now you can. And let's say, okay, we want to choose to have this play backwards. So again, let's say if I just grab the original. So I'll take that sound, we'll drag the cowbell in. So you could combine the cowbell sample with other samples as well, but you could do all sorts of cool stuff using Pad Shop or even the spectral synthesis inside of Halligan 7 and break stuff apart. All right, so we see from Bratman Studios, as I've seen a couple of vids that mentioned Cubase 15.5. Was there a 15.5 update? I thought 1503 is the latest update. So I think it's 1503 is the latest. So Steinberg stopped doing like 0.5 versions. I think it's, 1503 is the latest version. So. All right, so we see from 54 Beatmaker, it says, thanks, Greg, by the way. I just bought Hallian. I'm confused. Where should I start? There are less tutorials available that goes into basics. So, check out, I'm sure Jazzu probably, One Man and His Songs has done a great Hallian tutorial. But if you were just kind of starting off, so Hallian is kind of a beast. You could treat it as its own kind of, instrument creation platform. If I was starting off with it for the first time, I would start off. You may get presented with this, and it's like, okay, you could come over here. It's like, okay, do I want to create an instrument? What type of instrument? These are different forms of synthesis and samples. So we could do analog, virtual analog, wavetable synthesis, spectral synthesis, FM synthesis, sample instrument, granular organ instruments. So if I wanted to come over here, let's say I want to do like a wavetable synth, I could just come over and say, okay, I'm there, but I could also right click. We could do an init program. So let's say I want to do, the spectral synth here. So let's take that cowbell sample and drop it in. So now, again, we could come over here and take different snapshots of your cowbell. You could adjust the position, the direction. And you can put on different effects. So let's say, but if we're just starting, I would just say, okay, you probably want to familiarize yourself with the instrument itself, like how to load up sound. So let's say I'm going to come over here. I like to go to the advanced option here, and this gives you a lot of different functions. So we can have all of our sound slots here. So you have 64 sound slots, 64 MIDI channels. And I can say, okay, I'm looking for I want to start off with a synth. So we'll come over, and one of the included synths that you will get with it is, let's say, voltage. Okay, so I'll just double click and we'll load up a preset. All right, so we have our synthesizer here. Now, when we come over, you could now choose to kind of edit your different zones. So now we're kind of breaking down our different synthesizers. So we can see, okay, we have two oscillators here that are our sound generators. And then let me clear my throat real quick. And then if I want to apply a filter, and then we're going to have the amplifier section. So, okay, I want this to be louder, softer, so we could adjust. We could come over here to do our envelope section. So say, okay, I want to do like a fade in. I want this to do fade in. We could also do modulation. So if we want to automatically adjust different LFOs to kind of change the sound over time, you could have kind of step modulators as well. So if you come over here, so you could kind of build up your different sounds, but I would start off just by going to the macro page and just kind of, there's lots of content that comes. So if you want that now, let's say, with Hallian, you get FM Lab. So, you have a full FM synthesis page. So if you want to come over here, and then you could have kind of all of your, so once you come over here, you can say, okay, let's go into, the FM oscillators, and you could see your different carriers. So all of these different functions are here, but it's all, and if you wanted to create your own sounds, all that information will be just, underneath the hood. And if you wanted to drag and drop samples in, let's say, okay, I want to do a new, I'll just initialize it here, and we'll just do a new, sample. So we'll just come over here and say new sample instrument. Then I could take any audio file that I want. We could go to our zone and say, okay, let's go to, and we see a mapping zone. So I could just say, okay, I just want to take this, and we could actually just drag it to the program. And now you could play, and just trigger your audio, and you can have multiple, different velocity layers. You could switch and morph between and overlap. So if you have multiple samples, but I would, if I was first starting with it, check out One Man and His Songs. He has a whole series of videos on Halligan. But my first thing, and realize that you could almost do any type of synthesis and sampling inside of Halligan. You don't have to have it all figured out. Figure out what you want to do with Halligan, and then you could probably get a path to go there. But I would first, whenever I get a new instrument, I try to explore the sounds and see, oh, that one's really cool. That, this instrument isn't the type of work I do. I do orchestral stuff, and I don't need, a virtual analog synthesizer. Maybe once in a while, I don't need FM synthesis. Or if I'm doing all synthesis, I may not need orchestral instruments or pianos. But you could kind of figure out what you want to get out of it. But really check out One Man and His Songs YouTube channel. It's he does a wonderful job of teaching Halligan. All right. Great. See, 54 Beatmaker says November's his favorite month because of this Cubase release. Suggest you to share the link to Gary Gibbons' Pad Shop tutorials. Suggest you just tell me crank up duration. So let me just come back to this one. So I can find the duration. Just try from scratch here real quick again. See if I can find it. So, and then you could also, it's a number here. So, but all sorts of fun stuff you can do. But yeah, check out Gary Gibbons' videos. Guy's great. Great. So, all right. So we see John Barry got his drag and drop SysX going from XTC, the UAC control being turned off in a recent Windows 11 update. Glad you got it figured out. Okay. So you see John Barry asks, says, what are layers in Groove Agent 6? All right. So let's say, let's go ahead and we'll just open up. So with Groove Agent 6, you could have, multiple samples layered together. All right, so let's come here. All right, so let's say I'm building a monster kick drum. Okay. So let me just check what. Okay, so I want to come over and we're going to drop in some different samples. So let's say I will come over here. Let's get to samples. And we'll get to, say, we're looking for kick drums. All right, so. All right, so now if we want this to, so I want that kick drum to be layered. So let's find another kick. So let's take a Cinematic Odyssey. All right, so I'll have that. Let me I'll remove that layer real quick because it's more not sample based. More. Let's get a Past Perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna come right over here. So now we could see that as we put in that we can just come over. Let me just. All right, so I drag it over so we see one dot. So let's go to, again, samples. All right, so now, what we could do, I have two different kick drum samples. We'll just come back over here. So. All right, so now that we have, so if I hit it soft, I could have this sample, or we could have another sample. So I'll just drag some over from Media Bay here quickly. All right, so I drag it so we see one dot, and we can see that now we have 3 different samples on our kick drum. All right, so I could have these automatically. So when we're in our mode for velocity, as I play different velocity, we could get different samples that will automatically kind of respond. So when I click here in the middle, but maybe I want all of these samples, and I could, so right now it's evenly distributed across 4 different samples, but I could say, okay, I could move these so that different velocity levels will allow me to trigger those. But if I didn't want those to be triggered by different velocities, like we could choose to layer. So when we layer, now all 3 of the samples will be played together. So when you hit the one kick drum, we can just come over. So let's say I want to take this particular layer here, and let's say, okay, I just want to go to my pitch envelope, and let's adjust our envelope amount, and I want the pitch to change here so that when we play it, you could just have like the pitch. So, but that's only doing it on that one particular layer. So we could, again, just come over and take multiple sounds and layer them all together right there. So pretty, so way of kind of stacking different samples. So when you hit one kick drum, you could have 32 kick drums come out. So it's typically used, like, a lot of times in many classic hard rock albums, even AC/DC Back in Black, the kick and snare are pretty much all samples are being triggered from an AMS unit. So, and they weren't real snares and kicks. All right, so you see Beverly just saying he thinks the live stream is in mono, not stereo, unless his headphones are in a blink. I think everything's in stereo. Let me just take a quick look. So yeah, it looks like it's being broadcast here in stereo. So maybe it's a headphone adapter cable or something like that. Great. So we see Adam Langford says new parent company of NI are doing nasty things to the developers too. So yeah, it's kind of, I saw that they closed the London office and laid off, like had a second round of layoffs and stuff. So it's kind of the nature of venture capital, unfortunately. Great. So we see Beverly still hearing in mono. Let me know if anyone else is only hearing the live stream in mono. All right. Let's see. Gareth just mentioning that Michael Teams' fires near his neighborhood at the moment. So we'll try to get we'll send rain dance vibes to Michael Teams' way. Beverly's now hearing stereo, so that's good. Don't want my audio to suck. See, Michael Teams happy that Gareth has made it. So we see from Adam Langford says, Jazzy, I think that the Pad Shop plugin has been discontinued. So I think it's still available to sell for people that don't have Cubase. Or maybe it's might be maybe a Pad Shop library. He did a library during COVID. Super great of him. All right. So we see Randy Lee Music joining from Texas, Dallas area. All right, let me go to, I think we had a couple more questions that were mailed in. So we had, so you see, I have some questions about starting a project and file management. Is there a way that a folder with the song name is automatically created when starting a new song? It could be an option in preferences if other users do not like it. All right. So when we're starting a new project, Cubase will prompt you by default. I think this changed in 10.5. When you go to create a new create an empty project, it opens up the file selector box here. So at this point, we would just choose to do a new folder. So I always recommend to people that they do a new folder per project so that each project has its own unique folder. So if I was here, let's say I wanted to put it into this, we would say, Club Cubase, live stream, party mix. Okay, so now I have a folder. So think of every project, every song as being in its own unique folder. And that will make the file management so much easier. So I'm going to come over here, hit open. Now we have a song. Now, just like most programs, we haven't saved a project yet. So, but when we do go to save a project, we could come over here, we could do a save or save as, and this will take us directly to the project because, maybe you're doing like song idea August 25th, 2026, but, and that's the folder. You can now just come over here and say, thing in E Phrygian mode. So you could give it a title, sometimes keeping the same title. I realize that not everyone has titles when they start, but at that point we could say, now we have our song saved, and that song is automatically saved into the project folder that we created. What a lot of people may do is every time they do a project, what you don't want to do is to come over here and say, okay, I want to do a new project, and you just hit OK. And that's going into the same folder, the previous folder. So when you come over here and create a new project, make sure that at this stage where it's really critical, that you are actually defining a project folder. If you kind of blow through this and you just hit the enter key, you may have multiple projects in a single folder. And if you're recording, you may have if you don't name your audio files before you record, you may have audio files that are called audio 01, audio 02, but you may have audio 01 audio files that are in other projects. And then there's the potential, if you rename something, that project audio files that are residing in the same folder that are used in different projects, if you change the name, if they have the same name, you may have an audio file from a project that shows up. It's like, why is it playing as an audio file from a different song? And that's because, each one, if you didn't name it, and, as you're recording, if the name gets changed, you delete a file, then that file may be referenced in that location to a different song. So that way, think of every file, every project. I always recommend to just put it into its own unique folder. All right. Let's see, we have some more live questions. All right. All right, so you see Beverly says, I actually compared a segment of your recent live stream on YouTube. It's it's in stereo today. It is clearly in mono, so it's not my headphones, but we can hear you loud and clear. But what you played in the pads that were right in the middle, no stereo separation. So let me know. I'll listen to the live stream afterwards. All right, so I think we have one more question. Let me get to that. How can I add a new sampler track when dragging audio from Media Bay so that it's not always at the bottom of the track list? Okay, so if we're in Media Bay and we're creating a sampler track, so say we create a new project here. I have, say, a number of audio tracks. All right, so if I'm over here and I choose to make a sampler track from something, like I right click and I say, okay, create a sampler track. At that point, it's going to add the sampler track to the bottom. Now you could also just, if I want my sampler track to come out after audio 3, I could right click, let's add a sampler track here. I could do that, and then I could just drag the audio to the sampler track, and now that sampler track is now directly in the middle. So if there's no sampler track that's created, it's going to add it at the bottom, just, and if you are want the sampler track in a specific location, just simply add the sampler track and then just drag the audio file right there into the sampler track, and then that sampler track is exactly where you placed it. Otherwise, it's going to place it at the bottom. Like when you add new tracks, they generally go to the bottom. So all right, see if there's more live questions. Come up. So we see from Soul Sound Official, hi Greg, question, will we be able to have a VU meter for all channels on the mixer in the future? So, I mean, anything is possible in software. It's always a possibility. I think sometimes, the meters, sometimes a VU meter may not be as accurate as often what we're looking at. I know that there's kind of an emotional warmth to seeing VU meters for a lot of us. But, sometimes the VU meters aren't necessarily as accurate, and, we could see, and sometimes switching between an input versus the output metering on VUs, could be a little harder. So I know a lot of people will have a VU meter open, like let's say, okay, we're here.
What dimension am I? What dimension am I?
If you wanted to have a reference VU meter, if you're looking at 200 VU meters, it could, sometimes not be as beneficial. But if we come here to the control room, I know some people that are, want to have a VU meter perspective will just come over here and have, say, okay, we want to go to our signal and have our VU meter, and let's just set this to VU dB full scale.
What dimension am I? What dimension?
And so often I see, like many of my engineering friends, old school engineering friends, I will see lots of stuff where it's like, okay, I want this, and I want, let's switch this to, let's get to our spectral. So we want a spectrum curve
what dimension?
or a spectrum bar. So like this is a common hardware, when I think of,
what dimension?
like what people have in their studios a lot, they may come over and say, okay, let's add another meter here. And once it's in the control room, we could say, let's switch this to phase. So we can say, okay, let's make this into our phase scope. And I want to make this, we'll go to the right here. And let's just do like a panorama view.
What dimension am I in?
So like as you're kind of playing back your projects, you know, a lot of people I know will have,
What dimension
you
am
know, your different functions there. So as we go to audition, let's just say, okay, let's come over to, you know, our drum loop. So as we, you know, this is often kind of what's sitting on top of a console, like people that have hardware accessories. So I'm not sure if we'll see a VU meter, and I think, you know, seeing it on like 200 tracks, you know, may not be as practical overall, but you know, it's always a possibility. So you see Jazz Dude, who worked with a lot of VU meters, says that VU meters are pretty inconsistent. All right. All right, so you see John Barry, it says I've used a meter on a Q send, then you select which channel feeds it with each channel's Q send on and off. That's a great solution as well, John. He's such a clever guy. Jazz Dude just mentioning views were slow and worked within a plus or minus 1 or 2 dB range of tolerance. So you see Jazz Dude says, I feel like the view then just added as a nice effects like a lava lamp. All right, so let's see if we have any more questions. I think I'm out of questions that were sent in advance. See if there's any more questions that come in. So once again, just a quick programming note. If you missed it earlier, we will, so next week, for starting in September, I'll miss the first 3 live streams because I'm going to be in Hamburg for meetings at Steinberg office. I've been there in 2019, so I'm looking forward to seeing all my colleagues at Steinberg and going back to Germany. So like September 1st, 4th, and the 8th, we will not have live streams. I was trying to work it out to see if I could do a live stream while in Hamburg, but I'm kind of in meetings during those times. But we will be back on September 11th. Friday is the last live stream of the month. We will have a special guest, Bob Bullock, who's kind of a seasoned engineer, just worked on so many great, amazing records, super nice guy, educator. So looking forward to everyone meeting Bob on Friday. And we'll see if there's any more quick questions that come up. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. Thanks for all the great questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button, tell your friends about the live streams. And we'll, be back in September, starting on September 11th with our normal live stream schedule. Michael Graybill says he's going to grab Hallian while the sale is lasting. So Adams just wished me a great trip to Hamburg. All right, see if there's last minute questions. I know there's usually about a 20-second gap from when I speak to when you guys hear. Thanks for the travel wishes, Randy Lee. Hope you're doing well. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back on Friday. Looking forward to more people joining for the Zoom social meetup. It's always a great way to meet each other as well as get some great insights from Bob Bullock. Okay, so we see just a last minute question from Rick. Bratman Studios is in Halligan 7. If I go through buttons to mixer to options, then it goes to license problems. All right, so let's just come over. So let's add a Halligan 7. Great. Buttons. So let's say if we're here, maybe go to mixer. Mixer to options, and then it goes to license problems. If you want to email me a screenshot, going to email me a screenshot, Rick, at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to take a look at it. But you could check to see if you go into your Steinberg activation manager to make sure that your license is activated. So like come over to the Steinberg activation manager. I think mine is activated through Absolute. So when I go to my license, just make sure that that you have that it's activated in the activation manager as well. Great. All right. So I think we are out of questions. And with that, we'll see everyone back on Friday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and looking forward to seeing everyone on the Zoom social meetup and for you guys to be able to meet Bob Bullock. All right. With that, we will go ahead and wrap up, and we'll see you back on Friday. Take care.